Okay, July 1st, continuing. Um, Most of our DNA has no function known to conventional science, and my guess is that that's how the living experience is continued through the ages, and it also may be the vehicle. I'm inclined to think that it's also the specific way in which the planets influence our behavior and character. Um, Through the so-called junk DNA. Um, can't be junk at all. Something as important as DNA can't be virtually 90% useless. Um, so this the importance of the native wisdom just came to the fore again. This is an article from Saturday, June 30th. Um, because the wisdom of the indigenous peoples, they're relatively free. They've regained the freedom from the damage that civilized humanity has suffered and perpetrated. And to a great extent, they are our salvation. The knowledge of our origins that's in the Mesopotamian tale. Somehow Jane didn't come in. There, got her in. Hi, Jane. So sorry, the click didn't work before. Um, uh, so that the origin story in the Mesopotamian tale, that's necessary for our salvation, but it's not sufficient. And one of the things that is in the gap that will make it possible for our fallen species to be redeemed is the wisdom that's residing in the native peoples. So something that's just happened there. Um, Good news that the native tradition is so intact, but the news that's being transmitted is not so great. So um, with the arrival of a white buffalo calf, which is just born in Yellowstone, um, it, the tradition, the legend is that Earth is now at a crossroads with the birth of this calf. Um, for the Lakota people, um, it's a prophecy coming through. It's a sacred symbol, the calf, and a warning that a spiritual awakening must happen, end quote. That's from the chief looking horse. Um, According to the legend, white buffalo calf woman appeared over 3,000 years ago to two scouts and, among other things, left a bundle of artifacts. Um, and she said, Chief Looking Horse is also the 19th keeper of the artifact bundle. Um, the woman said to the people, "The next time I stand upon the earth as a white buffalo calf, nothing will be good no more." And Chief Looking Horse said that his grandmother said on her deathbed that he would be the last sacred bundle keeper from White Buffalo Woman. Um, if the people don't straighten up, he'll be the last one. And either we face global disasters, illness, and false leaders, or we can unite globally. The chief says that he believes that the prophecy shows that now is the time that people around the world must unite and become better stewards of the planet. So it's both ominous and hopeful. Both. from those people. Now let's talk about the field, whatever you want to call it, source, one. Um, and I'm gonna read from the appendix on the field in Evolution Diverted, because how do we know it's there? How do we know it's real? Um, I'll just go down the list of phenomena. One is healing with prayer. Uh, Praying can speed recovery from illness, even across long distances and without the patient knowing of the effort. There have been some studies that have done that. Transcontinental prayer, improving the recovery time, like after surgery or from pneumonia or things like that. Energy healing, hands-on methods involving focused intention can relieve pain and significantly alter the course of illness. Shamanic healing, appealing to ancestral and communal spirits in ritual, can resolve physical and mental conditions, both acute and chronic. And one of the ways that I've been helping this along recently is with family constellation workshops. Psychokinesis, this is a little controversial, but small objects can be moved and shaped by intention. Electronic anomalies, this one was definitely demonstrated, but it was so inconvenient a set of facts that it's been completely forgotten. A lot of the work was done at Princeton. Computer applications that generate strings of random digits can be influenced by thought to increase or decrease how often a selected digit appears. In other words, you can influence a certain type of computer program. Biological anomalies. The electrical resistance along the surface of a leaf can be affected by the thoughts of a person who is near the plant. That's known as the Baxter effect. Well, Cleve Baxter was his entry into the work came through lie detection, and one of the things measured in the lie detector process is the apparent electrical resistance on the skin. So with a negative response, the skin becomes more resistant to the current. And he found this with plants, that they would react negatively. They would react negatively if you took a match to one leaf. All the rest of the plant would show this effect. And even more interestingly, you're muted, Jim. Jim wants to jump in here.
Even if he thought about doing it in a different room,
Yes, yes.
the instrument showed a plant response.
I was getting there. If he approached the plant with a match, it would react. And even if he thought about burning the leaf, as Jim just said, it would react.
But these were plants that he had association with personally over time.
Yes, yes. The plant was reacting more strongly because, well, why would you do that to a friend?
It could be, and it might explain why efforts by other people to replicate those events didn't go so well, have not gone so well.
Right, right. Also, the ones for whom it didn't go so well may have contributed in ways that they wouldn't credit, but by expecting there to be a null result. If they think it's not going to show, then very likely it won't. And that's not evidence that they want to consider. And that one's hard to measure.
Right.
Clairvoyance, knowing about distant events, precognition, knowing about events that have not yet occurred, and that's a little easier to consider when you think that the unmanifest medium is timeless. Everything all at once. Localization. Dowsers can find missing objects and people from maps. Pets can cross vast expanses of unfamiliar terrain to reach their owners. ESP, animal communication, we're going to get into that, but at this scale, slime molds, which are masses of undifferentiated cells, they're just a mass of cells. They can navigate mazes in search of food. And large flocks of birds and schools of fish clearly move like one organism. They move like it's like an amoeba moving in the sky. And I don't think anybody has done the math, but I'm sure if you crank in the speed of perception to moving a wing, and you see how long it would take for an impulse to get from one edge of the flock to the other, that it's impossible. It's impossible to do by neuromechanical means.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I've watched them and thought about that.
Yeah.
May I add one thing that has
always, and whenever. Yeah.
In terms of the field, I mean, this is a question that I think I'm only finally now at this stage of my life getting some answers to. But I have always had this question in the back of my head: why does one thing happen instead of something else? And I guess I've always been told that it wasn't even a good question, but to me, it's the only question. And what I'm coming to believe over the years, and a lot of the research that you talked about in the Princeton Engineering Anomalies research program, where and everything Maharishi has done makes it very clear that consciousness is somehow influencing physical reality. Okay. I mean, I don't have any doubt about that. What I think I'm seeing right now in the world, however, is the effect of the field in that it is time. It is independent of time. And that's because I believe what's happening right now, what's happening in the world to me, BC, it seems so insane that there's got to be an explanation for it. And what I'm coming around to is there is some kind of mass response, whatever you have it, that doesn't make any sense to me, but it makes sense to an awful lot of people, that has to come from somewhere. And the whole Mesopotamian story makes it make sense. This whole idea that we are worshiping an obviously flawed persona that is leading us, in terrible ways, but it doesn't seem to matter because we are enthralled with that. I think the power of what's happening right now, to me, is proof of the field. This idea of the presence of the past, that things that happened so long ago can have such a huge impact on the world today. And that's my interpretation, of course, of the world today. But it is this thing that's locked into our whatever that causes many of us to do such self-destructive stuff. Anyway, what do you think?
Yes, and we'll be coming, we'll get into that even deeper a little bit. But the question that you first upped with, which you was told was not a good question, you know, why does one thing happen and not something else? You know, why does the field go this way, not that way? Sometimes, you know, when it's not being a reenactment or a replay, it's seemingly random. One way to understand that is that the field is learning, experimenting, playing, and so it will look maybe childish, you know. It'll look like, well, there's no reason for doing that, but it just felt like it. You know? And that may be, you know, that may be one of the ways, one of the types of wrinkles. Okay, those who have, you know, tried to give some thought to the field, they come to some of these are the typical conclusions. First is that it's the most fundamental means of communication between organisms, the basic means of communication. So transmission through the field is instantaneous. Animals sense the field in parallel with bodily sensations. So this accounts for some of the speed and accuracy of the work of the specific senses. In other words, the senses are not doing the job alone. The field unites human minds within the species collective mind, bringing all of us into connection. Since lifetimes overlap, the field contains a record of all that humanity has experienced. Carl Jung called this, you know, collective unconscious. You know, and in the book, and Linda was repeating it, that the human condition is perpetrated because the trauma, shame, and confusion of humanity's life under the Anunnaki are transmitted between persons, groups, and generations. And it's likely that our verbal and nonverbal means of transmission, which are well studied by psychology, they're supplemented by transmission through the field. You know, and that's a function that conventional psychology is stubbornly unaware of. Now, it's got different names. And this is like the several blind wise men around the elephant. It's got different names for different aspects. In physics, the ether; in psychology, collective unconscious, and ESP; in biology, animal magnetism and morphogenetic field; in Eastern traditions, chi, prana; in philosophy, the one; in religion, Holy Spirit, source, and God. And grasping the unity that's behind these several aspects, that can be quite a challenge. You know, that it really is an elephant with all these different parts. Now, knowing about the field, I think it's important to us as we're exploring what's going to become of us and how we're going to get out of this trap. The understanding and appreciating the field, I think, is important for two ways. One, we just talked about, you know, it makes transmission much more plausible, much more understandable over tens of thousands of years. Okay. But another, and pardon me for getting on my hobby horse here, but the existence of the field pulls the rug out from under the Big Bang theory, which is getting weakened all by itself, recently. But once you accept that there is a mass-free flowing continuum that transmits light, the way water and bone and air, transmit sound, then the Big Bang falls apart, and that contributes to the entire mechanistic paradigm falling apart, and that paradigm includes, kind of like religiously holding to a purely natural evolutionary process producing Homo sapiens. And I think about the whole paradigm collapsing all at once. This is what happened with the Aristotelian thought, because the Aristotelian paradigm included biology and physics and astronomy and chemistry, and it all fell apart all at once. There's seemingly separate disciplines. They were united in a particular way of thinking. Same thing, which I think has got to happen for us to really save ourselves. Now, Linda found a terrific article where that demonstrates the existence of intelligence, intelligent process, at the cellular level. The work of someone named Michael Levin, director of the Allen Discovery Center at Tufts and the Tufts Center for Regenerative and Developmental Biology. I don't want to get into the details, but it's not just DNA that's responsible for communication, but the cells know where they are and what to do because of electrical currents. They are, in addition to biochemically, they're communicating bioelectrically. Now this is actually not totally new, because it's at a macroscopic scale. It's been known for a while about currents in the body, but Levin's work is currents within cells and within nuclei, and I'll add my 2 cents to his his discoveries, which are really quite impressive. That the electrical currents are the measurable, detectable phenomena using our existing instruments, but that they are a secondary phenomenon. In other words, they are an aspect of the field. The field has this electrical aspect in the same way that it has a more purely spiritual aspect. And but it's measurable. But to me, it's important not to assume that the electrical aspect of the communication is the be all and end all. That is the evidence. The evidence is a little weak to try to connect it with the field, but it's suggestive enough to me anyway. But maybe I'm easily suggestible. Another good thing that's happening is one piece after another, one group of astronomers after another, keep getting closer and closer to finding what we know of as the planet of the gods, in Sitchin's counting system, it would be the 12th planet. Because he adapting the 11 bodies that make up the significant bodies of the solar system. The planets from Mercury to Pluto plus Sun and Moon. And then the planet of the gods, Nibiru. Depending on how you count, it's also being called Planet 9. They take Pluto out of the mix. It's much easier to call Planet X. And what I like about Planet X is that the X brings back in the story of the crossing, because it's the planet of the crossing, you know. And they keep saying they're getting closer and closer. And when they do, you know, if the collapsing paradigm needs one last straw, that'll be it. Because much to their surprise, if they dare to look, and you heard it here first, you know, they will find that it fits the parameters of planet Nibiru in the Mesopotamian tablets. That it is got a 3,600 year period, that it's about 1,000 years out now. It's below the plane of the ecliptic. It is aiming to cross the plane of the ecliptic through the asteroid belt, and it's reflective for a body that's that far out. It's kind of bright, and it is golden. And if it's close enough to do a temperature measurement, they'll find that it's not an ice ball, but it is too warm for a body in deep space. All those things. Let's just say it'll sell a lot of my book. And so it'll be one really big deal. But because it'd be such a big deal, it's possible that unconsciously they'll spike their own guns and keep themselves from finding it. I don't know. Don't know how that's going to play out. Because one of the things that trips up some of the researchers is that they attribute some of the gravitational effects on the outer bodies of the solar system to it being a really hugely massive body. Instead of thinking that it may not be quite that massive, but it affects the smaller bodies that it's bouncing around because it comes close to them. You know, that you know may not be enough in their thinking. Anyway, in other words, they may be looking for too big an object, but that's another story. Some hope coming our way, another sort of hope being articulated by one of Linda's favorite people, Avi Loeb, who's speculating that there may be immense benefits from discovering advanced extraterrestrials. In other words, the terribly traumatized Anunnaki, not the only ones out there. Many of the close encounters of the third kind, including some of the abduction experiences, you know, particularly the ones that were studied by the psychiatrist, Harvard psychiatrist John Mack, are inclined to see them as beneficent and helpful. So Avi Loeb says, you know, civilizations that emerged, early in the 13.8 billion years of the Milky Way, they're likely to be the ones that we encountered first because they're the most advanced in our neighborhood. And he's got a positive spin on it, that they could help us change our priorities, um, get away from our disputes on this rock, and draw us, into exploring interstellar space. If we pay attention to the lessons that we may learn from them, we'll get a messianic message of peace and prosperity that traditional religions are praying for. It's a positive take. It isn't the only take. Some of them are some of the interpretations are kind of dark. But if there's, something of great benefit out there for us, it makes you think that even though right now the ideas of colonizing Mars and the moon are rather nuts, that the impulse behind them is not all that bad. The impulse to connect with, not all that bad. So now to the dark side, or the darker side. Okay. So historically, the innate and native awe of creation, of creative force, of the great mystery, awe of the one source, was diverted by the ones who came in and said, "We are your gods." And at the same time diverted by genetic manipulation, which produced, among other things, the trait of automatic deference. If someone appears like he is worthy of being deferred to, is worthy of being worshipped and followed, then people will worship and follow automatically without him having had to prove his worth. As you may have heard me say before, I'm convinced that that was one of the genetic manipulations that were put into us, and maybe it was already there in the Anunnaki, because they had such a hierarchical society. They were so strictly ranked that it may have been what their elite engineered for their commoners, or maybe it had evolved more or less naturally in their millions of years on a self-contained artificial world. At any rate, obviously such a negative trait to have. It messes things up when the leader has no natural authority, doesn't really have the skills, whether it be the military or business or politics. There's no way that we could have naturally evolved, such a destructive trait. Now it shows up directly in worshiping, revering, following. No cost is too great, in service to the Great One. And as a result, civilized humanity tends to seek and long for rulers. Now that is kind of two-pronged because there have been good ones. There have been noble kings. In Mesopotamia, they were called the righteous shepherds. But at the same time, they're the ones that are totally indifferent to the masses. And both qualities, the tablets suggest that both qualities were demonstrated at different times in different cities, you know, by the Anunnaki lords. But then there seems to be oh, let me back up a minute. Okay. Automatic deference. Well, if it was a built-in intentionally, how come it's not present in the indigenous peoples? There, you know, if the chief puffs up too much and is too big for his loincloth, you know, he wakes up one morning, you know, and his teepee is the only one around, and the rest of the tribe has disappeared. You know, they voted with their feet and with their bosses' hooves. So the indigenous people do not have this automatic exaggerated respect. So somehow they've repressed, if we got it right, that this was a, you know, a left-handed gift from the Anunnaki for basically, you know, so that we'd be better controlled. All they had to do was say, we're the gods, you know, and that was it. You know, people stepped in line. How did they must have repressed the genetic tendency. So, you know, returning to life in nature, rediscovering their Homo erectus identity, their epigenetics came into play, you know, and this tendency got faded away. It didn't get dropped from the DNA, but it got acquired. Linda's hand is up.
Yes.
Yes.
They either lost it or they never had it. And so my thought has been that there were people, particularly darker skinned people. I have a feeling the Anunnaki were terribly racist.
Oh yeah.
And I mean that, and so people like the Native Americans, maybe even Africans, were either escaped or rejected early enough on that they didn't get all the blocks that the rest of us did. Is that a possibility?
That's a possibility that you know, because we know if we look at the king list and try to time this out, there was an awfully long time from the authorization for the lab hybridization until the first appearance of Homo sapiens, a long time. So it could be that there were sequences or layers of manipulation, and that there were some who never got it, and they were more likely to escape. Could be. So it may not be just that it was.
Or maybe they were maybe they were bad students and they got kicked out. I mean, that they were rejects. Why would the Anunnaki care what happened to them? I mean, there's something different about the native populations around the planet in that they never sought to they seem to have a much deeper relationship with the earth and deeper understanding of the earth in general, and their social structure seemed to be very different than what we see in the rest of us.
Yeah, so it could be not what I'm speculating, that they had the same trait of deference and it got suppressed. But they never had it, or never had it anywhere near as strongly in the first place. That could be. That could be. Um, and there's evidence that it wasn't only the primitive forest dwelling people, because we talked some months ago about the discovery of some cities of unique form that were in the steppes of Western Asia, where there was no hierarchy, no grid, no temples. That the city was one great big circle, like a mile or more in diameter, with agriculture, small scale, attached to the spine, animal husbandry inside the circle, and nodes along the way, maybe a quarter mile, half a mile, well, less than that, some kind of communal structure, something that might be a bathhouse or a meeting house, that was repeated all around the circle. So clearly, with that physical manifestation, there was what we might call semi-civilized culture without hierarchy. Um, opposing the drive to have the leader, the anointed one. There were the aristocrats, but of course, they want to knock off the king because they want to be the ones deferred to. So King John and his nobles, that story. And then there are the Democrats, who want to do away with the king. We're coming up on July 4th, right? The question there is for how long? Basically, how long can they keep it up? And that's what we're facing now. How long can we keep it up? Lincoln said that was the big question with the Civil War. Was, how could any nation conceive in liberty and dedicate it to the proposition of all men are created equal? How long can it endure? With less lofty language, H.L. Mencken observed that the American people know exactly what they want, and they'll get it good and hard. So and one of the ways in which the opposition to the powerful shows up, I think, is in the hatred of the Jews. Because their sin is always, one of their principal sin is always that they're all controlling, they're powerful. They're doing it maybe secretly, but they're in control. And one of the links between the Jews and the Anunnaki lords is language. The the second language of Mesopotamia, Akkadian, the language of the first empire on Earth, the Akkadian Empire. Akkad, by the way, means unified. That was the first Semitic language. So there's a straight line from Hebrew of the Hebrew Bible to modern Hebrew in Israel, you know, to
Right.
pardon. Oh, there was a sneeze. Okay. Um, also, there is a patriarchal genetic link. The priestly line of the Kohens, the priests, apparently goes right back to Aaron, brother of Moses. Um, um, there's some studies of the on the drift of mutations, signifying that most of the many, well, maybe most of the Kohens now really did spring from one male at about that time in history. And then there are the tales in the Hebrew Bible, which are really traumatizing tales, because they're somewhat transformed. They're changed into the into the acts of Yahweh, but they're really the same acts of the self-deified gods, the same destructive acts that were in the described in the tablets, and therefore in our collective unconscious, you know. And here are the Jews, reminding us about all of this with their Old Testament. And then there's the whole, trouble around being the chosen people of Yahweh. Okay, which just reproduces each Mesopotamian city's population being the chosen people of the God of that city. So there's a lot of painful, not quite unconscious, subconscious memory of terrible times, painful times, that gets easily attached to the Jewish people. There was no coincidence that anti-Semitism, that's a 19th century euphemism. I mean, it really means hating Jews. It's no coincidence that it's coming up with tyranny, which is the return of the darker and the meaner of the Anunnaki lords. So it all fits all too well. And we don't, I don't know that we're justified in saying that hi Sandy. I don't know that we're justified in saying that the field has any particular intention, positive or negative.
Hmm.
It has the intention is to learn. Its intention is to learn. And that's a good part of what we're here for. You could say that that if the field wanted this hybridization to happen, it's because we're particularly good at helping helping the field learn about its possibilities. I see that Linda's waving her hand again.
Yeah, I I guess the question is, given all this information, what do we do about it? And because I'm pretty I really hate the thought that I'm being given problems I can't solve. At least at some level solve. And so, I mean, you talked about doing you've done family constellation work.
Yeah.
I've done a little of that myself. And it's amazing to me to think that I could be significantly in my life today, affected by something that happened to an ancestor of mine generations ago. And yet I've done the constellation stuff, and I've had the experience of having my own sort of my own shame literally dissolved by doing that work, and realizing that there was family shame, and in my case the family shame was associated with the fact that we were witches, and we were very interested in keeping that secret. But so at least that's what I've gotten out of the constellation work. And what I am blown away by is the power of stuff that happened so long ago. I mean, we tend to think, well, maybe this stuff wears off. But what we're talking about here, it's almost like it's more powerful in bringing people into line with certain kinds of behaviors. And so, and there's a group action. It's almost like a group psychosis going on. It looks to me like, anyway. I mean, do you see that?
Well, it's communal. I don't know if I call it psychosis, but it's certainly self-destructive and unproductive. But yeah.
Well, we haven't begun to see how self-destructive it is.
One again, I'm going into an area where you got to take my word for it, because I can't. It would take hours and hours to demonstrate the solidity of this, but there's a received system that I with tongue in cheek call astrology on steroids, because it involves aspects of planetary astrology and the I Ching and the channels of the tree of life and the chakra centers. It's called human design, and it's so complex that very few people can really do a good reading of it. But someone who does a good reading for you, just knock your socks off, because you just can't believe how specific you get told, you get reinforced your characteristics, your experience, from just giving the reader, your birthplace and time to the minute. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that one of the things that the system relies on is something that I intuitively came to before I learned about the system. And that is that it involves the intersection of two lines of inheritance, two independent lines of inheritance. And one is the ancestral line, going back at least 7 generations. Okay, that the chart that gets read out is the result of an ancestral inheritance and a sequence of incarnations, a soul's inheritance, and that intersection of the familial family field chromosomal inheritance and the sequence of incarnations that forms the individual human life, the destiny of that life. So that's one way in which it's demonstrable in a reading that reveals, like, well, how could you possibly know that minute detail of my personality just from knowing where and when I was born? How can you do that? That's because the inheritance is so strong. And so in the family constellation, which is basically, it comes out of Zulu shamanism. That's that's just another manifestation of it, another way in which it's revealed. After a while, things like this, are astounding, but no longer surprising. It's like, oh, okay, right. It's all wrapped up. So we have no way of knowing how it's going to play out on this planet, do we? We do know that this is a particularly juicy for life, orbit that we're in. This is a sweet spot around a star of this size, and that's probably why we get visitors from far away, from elsewhere in the galaxy, because the word is out that this is a life positive orbit for a planet of this size. And if my reading is correct, and I don't see any reason to to think that I haven't seen any reason against it, and that is, this was the original orbit for the planet of the gods, and it got ejected from this orbit. But this is where the humanoid race that became the Anunnaki evolved initially, right here in the third orbit. So this is a good place, and that's one that seems to be one reason to maintain hope, although we don't know what the dominant life form is going to look like, in the far future, or maybe even the kind of near future. Maybe it'll be some hybridization of apes and octopi. I don't know. what do we do? I think the assignment is to do what you can do to maintain hope at a personal level. And to keep learning, keep watching, keep figuring it out. Because if you're figuring it out, so is the one through you. Your explorations in whatever way, whether it be music or microscope or whatever your tool is, you are a learning instrument of the one.
I think there's more we can do.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. If I did, believe me, I'd tell you. But one thing I'm sure about is it involves love. And that we need those of us who are considering ourselves resistant to what it looks like is a recurrence of authoritarian dominance on near the whole planet, as far as I can tell. There are awful lot of us going in great horror looking at that. And I think we need, if there is a force that is a collective force that's making this happen, that a collective force invoking the power of love can stop it. I believe. I guess that would be my manifest. Yeah.
Well, certainly in some circumstances, I would say right action is driven by love. In other cases, it's accompanied by love. I'm reminded of some of the training of the samurai, and I don't know whether this was for all the schools of samurai martial thought or just some. But it was, you are not to hate your opponent. Kill them, out of necessity, but not to hate. As a matter of fact, if you have enough balance, when you're striking the fatal blow, your thought is, I love you. I'm obligated to kill you, and I know that you're obligated to kill me if I don't kill you, but that doesn't take us out of the sphere of love, which is pretty interesting. Look how easily both sides got into singing Christmas carols in English and in German during the Christmas peace. I forget what year it was, maybe 1916, on the front lines of World War I. They got right into it. They had a happy time. And the next day they went back at it.
My partial understanding of that event was that officers on both sides became concerned that the men were losing their zeal for combat.
Right, right. Sure. Yeah, they were falling a bit out of enthrallment with dying. Because one of the things that, you know, uh, they, they fostered, you know, was, you know, you're serving the king. You're serving the king. Something greater than yourself. And that can have very positive or very negative manifestation. Hmm. So we're gonna know a lot more about our fate fairly soon. And you know, we wonder, aren't things destined? And the formula that I like to remember is that, you know, there really is randomness in the system. There really is choice, and that fate is the result of destiny modified by choice. So any matter of fact, any destined tendency that you've got, say, you know, those lines of inheritance that I talked about, defining your destiny. Uh, that any particular tendency or trait, characteristic can be well used or poorly used or badly used. Any one. Uh, there's no such thing as a inherently, you know, positive trait. It just is what it is, and it can be well used or badly used. Hmm. Well, we'll know a great deal more about the drift of things in this country and in France and in England. I guess really all those things are not completely decided in India either right now. But next time we meet, we'll know a lot more about how things are headed. Uh, well, that's about as much as I can think of on all of this at this at this moment. 4 to 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. July 1st. Shall we close? Okay. Thank you all for being together. Moving things along as we are.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you all. And whatever the date is in August, the first Monday. See you then.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Blessings.